Hello again, and now I'm going to talk about how I will structure the word problems in Project 1. And many students mentioned that those problems are very complicated, and I just want to share the way how I usually structure a word problem as complicated as this one. So let's look at part one, talking about apple pies. So usually for word problems, I will read sentence by sentence, then structure the information that I need. So Arcelia, oh, I may not sure I don't know how to pronounce this name. Okay, how about just she? She plans to make apple pies for a upcoming fundraiser. She's making two types of apple pies. One type was mostly Granny Smith apples, which is tart and less sugar, and another type was mostly Red Delicious apples. So the two type of pies, so it's part one of project one, okay? So we were told there are two types of pies. So I'm going to have two types of pies. One is tart pies, and the other is sweet pies. Okay. And says she negotiated a great deal on apples from a local apple farm who gave her 50 Granny Smith apples and 70 Red Delicious apples. So we know that those apples finally, some will go to tart pies, some will go to sweeter pies. So we got Granny Smith apples, they're 50. And we got Red Delicious apples, they're 70. And we know that those 50 Granny Smith apples, some will go to tart pies, some will go to sweeter pies, and the same thing with the Red Delicious apples. Some go to tart pies, some go to sweeter pies. And let's continue reading the problem. If each of the tart pies takes 4 Granny Smith apples, so need 4 Granny Smith apples per pie, and needs 2 Red Delicious apples per pie. Same thing, let's look at the sweeter pies. Sweeter pies, each pie takes 5 red delicious apples per pie, and 1 Granny Smith apple per pie. Okay, so if you look at, in total we got 50 Granny Smith apples. So some goes to tart pies, some goes to sweeter pies, and Red Delicious apples, some go to tart pies, some go to sweeter pies. Correct? So question asks, how many of each type of pie can she make? So since we don't know we don't know exactly how many tart pies we are going to make, or she is going to make, or how many sweeter pies she is going to make. So we could assume she is able to make X tart pies and Y sweeter pies. And if you look at this graph, then you need to try to find equal relationships and set up equations, okay? We got two variables, meaning in order to solve these two variables, we need to set up two equations involving these two variables, correct? Okay, so you are going to set up two equations. First equation, second equation. And here is a question for you. So for what does the equal sign mean? Equal sign meaning like the left side and the right side, of the equal sign either represent the same thing. Because they are representing same thing, that's why they are equal. Or they are representing the same quantity. Okay, so if you look at this graph, let's look at Granny Smith apples. So think about whether we could find two different ways to represent the same quantity of number of Granny Smith apples. So one way is we were given there in total 50 Granny Smith apples, correct? So the other way is we could use how many Granny Smith apples that used for X tart pies and for white sweet pies. We know that each tart pie takes 4 Granny Smith apples. So X tart pies in total is going to take 4X Granny Smith apples. Am I right? Okay. But the rest of the Granny Smith apples will go to sweeter pies. So we know that each sweeter pie takes 1 Granny Smith apple. So Y sweeter pies takes in total Y apples. 1 for each sweeter pie, so Y pies will take Y apples. Y Granny Smith apples. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's look at red delicious apples. One way is we were given in total there are 70 apples, correct? And some goes into tart pies, and we know each pie takes 2 red delicious apples in 1 tart pie. X tart pies will take 2X red delicious apples. And in sweeter pies, each pie takes 5 red delicious apples. Y sweeter pies in total will take 5 Y red delicious apples. Now you see the process how I created those 2 equations. Now we got a system of equations, and you could solve this system of equations, find X and Y. Then you could answer, okay, she could make X tart pies and Y sweet pies. Okay, so this is just the way how I look into a long, complicated word problems. Because if you just always kind of repeatedly read the story, it's so hard to find the equal relationships. But if you structured the problem into a graph, into a picture, much easier. Since I'm a visual learner, so this helps a lot. And I think many students have difficulties of developing equations because it's still lack of understanding what does equal sign mean. So you always need to make sure that the left side and the right side of the equal sign representing the same thing. So some students added 50 and 70 together in order to get the total number of apples she has. Then some wrote down like 4x plus y equals 120. But the problem is this side representing only Granny Smith apples, but this side, if you use the 120, represent total number of apples, including both Granny Smith apples and Red Delicious apples. So how can they be equal, right? And some students use the x this side, 120 this side, but this, if you use the only x here, representing the number of pies, and you equal number of pies equal to number of apples, no. definitely from your real life situation, you know that number of pies definitely should be less than the number of total apples you have, right? Okay, so this is the way how I structured part 1 problem, and the other 2 problems very similar, but maybe a little bit more complicated because fractions are involved. So I hope this explanation could help you, or at least give you some hints, guidelines, and I hope you could spend enough time to look into those problems and draw different pictures, tables, and develop the equations and to answer those 2 questions, 2 problems. Okay, if you have more questions about project 1, let me know. Email me.